Folks, we're here to solve the most important question of our day. What is the best deer cartridge in the world?
Nobody has ever considered this one before.
No! It's such an unusual topic.
I know
we
it.
Felt
How
like
did you
we
come up with that?
Inspired, I guess.
Wow, that's great.
So, friends, we've had such a great response from our recent show on our choices for the best, and our picks for our favorite elk cartridges that we thought we should do a follow-up. So here we are to talk about deer cartridges. And of course, I've got my good friend Ron Spomer here with me. He's one of our all-time favorite and most popular guests on the show. Thanks again for taking the time to talk about deer cartridges.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Good to be here.
You finally found your podcast voice, Ron.
Yeah, it's been hiding us. Didn't want people to know us from Alabama.
You're actually from North Dakota? South Dakota.
I thought I was Southern. That's why I got this accent.
There you go.
South
Yeah.
Dakota.
So you actually grew up shooting a few whitetails.
Yeah, they were just coming on. I can remember seeing the first ones as a lad at the farmhouse. I heard the screen door slam on my aunt say, "Deer, deer, deer, deer." It took me a while to figure out what that meant.
Big deal, yeah.
First ones we'd ever seen. Whitetails running across the cornfield.
So I was kind of the opposite. I grew up in southern Utah during the last remnants of the mule deer heyday. I remember counting 130 mule deer in my dad's alfalfa field. This was back when we did deer counts to see how many depredation doe tags we were going to get each fall. Can you imagine a mule deer depredation doe tag?
Yeah, I remember
Utah?
those days of depredation stuff. They were here and there, but boy, they sure aren't the last 10 years.
Different times. Yeah, we had that horrible winter kill of 93, and they've never recovered to the point where they were before that.
I see so many dead ones on the highways around here. It's like, how can they ever recover? I mean, we all think about, well, coyotes are getting them and cougars are getting them, but man, the cars that are hammering them all winter.
And here we are to talk about cartridges to hammer them
them
with
some
all fall. So
Such hypocrites.
we're going to dive in, and each of us present our choice for the single most practical deer cartridge on the market here in just a minute, and then we'll spend the rest of the time talking about our favorites, because that's more fun, right?
That makes sense.
But first, talk us through when you got started in deer cartridges and deer hunting on a broad scale, because you've lived in Kansas, Indiana, Idaho, South Dakota, a lot of places where you shot a lot of deer over the years.
Yeah, I've been around in pretty good whitetail country. Most of my best deer hunting for whitetail have been in Kansas, South Dakota, Colorado, eastern Colorado, surprisingly for a lot of folks. But not really the traditional Midwest like Ohio and further east. Partly because I'm kind of a Western boy and I appreciate the great open spaces. And I got so good at hunting open spaces. My style of hunting does not lend itself to the big eastern woods. I can hunt them, and I have done so successfully. And I feel I'm having a pretty good time when I do it. But I just don't get that joyful feeling of being out in the wide open expanses. I always call it the freedom of getting away from fake life into real life. Real life is man as hunter-gatherer. So to get away from the city and the jobs and all the constraints that are put around us, get out in the open country of the plains states or the Rocky Mountains, and I feel that freedom more than back in the East. That said, in South Dakota, when I was a kid, as I said, the deer were just starting to come back. But they had always been in good numbers in the Black Hills, the mountainous part of extreme western South Dakota, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
And in fact, I probably shot my first deer within about 30 miles of Mount Rushmore.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And for me, as a lad, it was really cool because I was on my first deer hunt. Everybody knows what that's like. And it was particularly fun in those days because we didn't see that many deer where we lived. It wasn't like you're seeing them every day and a run over on the road. It was a big deal to go with the grown-ups on a deer hunt in the big woods.
Still is.
Yeah.
I've got kids that are there right now. My littlest one is going on his first deer hunt this fall.
Oh, boy.
And he's almost as excited as I am.
Yeah. I hope it's always like that. And I think it should be. It would be. Why not? But anybody who's been there knows what it's like, and that's what it was for me. And not only was I in an exotic location, hunting what was pretty much an exotic animal, first big game animal, but we got the classic Christmas card snow scene. I was in the pine woods with snow coming down, just like all the stories you'd read over the years of the big bucks in the woods and the snow falling in. I shot my first deer in the snow, and magical. The whole thing was just absolutely magical.
No wonder you're still doing it.
Yeah.
And what cartridge did you use on that first deer hunt? 30-30.
You guessed. I told you wouldn't guess. What are you doing guessing? I had to have a 30-30. When I went down to the gun store, okay, get your deer rifle. The guy said, you might want this 243 bolt action. I don't remember what make it was, but it was like, what's that? And it had this little skinny bullet on it. And I said, no, I want a 30-30, by golly. All the cowboys use 30-30s. And most of the old guys were using 30-30s.
Sure.
There were some 270s and 30-6s and stuff, and some pump actions and some auto loaders, and just an eclectic mix. But I remember one kid, younger than I was, probably a couple of years, he's loading his rifle, and I said, what is that cartridge you're putting in there? It's a 222. I said, what? It's a 222.
Triple deuce.
A 222. What's that? I didn't even know what it was. I looked at it. I thought, that looks like it's for squirrels or something. You can't kill a deer with that. We were hunting deer with 222 Remingtons.
Yeah, that's very popular among the natives in Alaska here for seal hunting, which they can do legally, and they even shoot polar bears and stuff with them on occasion. A lot of caribou. Yeah.
Just because they have it.
It's all they have.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they know how to use it.
Sure.
Put the right bullet in the right place. But yeah, it was back in those days, the 222 was like the 223 is now.
Yeah.
It was.
Are you saying you were born before the 223 was?
Yep.
Very cool.
We both have what's called staying power.
Yes. I like that.
We don't hit very hard, but we stay around.
So before we dig right in and announce our choice for most practical deer cartridge on the market, let's define some parameters. Okay. Anytime you try and solve a problem, you should set some parameters, right? So what do you expect a deer cartridge to provide for you?
All right, I want reasonable carry weight, fast handling.
In the rifle.
In the rifle, right? And then I want the cartridge to be able to reach out with a dead-on hold to 300 yards.
Okay.
Most deer are killed easily inside of that. 200 yards for a lot of folks would be more than far enough. But because I hunt in the West in big open country, sometimes like 300. Yeah. And that means my point-blank range means I'm going to be shooting fairly flat.
Yeah.
So my round is more like a 270.
Some velocity.
Yeah, a little bit of velocity. 130 grain bullet. Anywhere from 100 grain, I would say, to 165.
Okay.
You could push it to 180, but really, I don't.
So this is the bullet weight range.
Yeah, the bullet
100
range.
to 165.
Yeah,
180,
and I would put 130 kind of right in the wheelhouse. In the middle of it all.
Okay.
So your velocities are going to be somewhere north of 2,800 feet per second, closer to 3,000. I like 3,000 because it gives me that little bit flatter trajectory for the long range. And that way, if you use some of your longer, heavier bullets, you're going to get a little higher BC.
Yeah.
So you're going to do a little better in the wind. And once again, out in the open country, you're going to want a little bit of that.
Sure. And this isn't really a discussion about bullets, folks, but always remember your cartridge is just a launching platform for the bullet. Now, choosing the right bullet for a deer is not nearly as crucial as it is for elk.
No, sure.
However, there's a big difference, let's say, between shooting a southern whitetail in Georgia or Alabama and shooting a big Saskatchewan buck that you've been sitting, in 30 degree to 0 degree temperatures for 9 days waiting to see. You get one look at him last day and he's disappearing into a thicket. You take that shot or lose it, you better have a good bullet for that.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
So just, keep that in mind. We're not here to talk bullets, but there are occasions when you got to pick your bullet. And, more than anything, today's modern bullets, like you mentioned, give you less wind drift and more retained velocity on impact, so you get better bullet mushrooming. So sometimes in the deer field, for me, it's all about picking BC.
Yeah. And a lot of folks are sick of hearing about BC, who cares?
Yeah.
And I get that argument because of inside of 300 yards, it's not a real huge deal between various bullets and their BCs, but if you're going longer than that, but they forget about the energy part.
Yeah.
They only think about, wind drift, who cares? Both of them can improve your success because reducing your wind deflection is going to make you more accurate. People will say, what does BC have to do with accuracy? That's kind of the critical part. Yeah, your rifle's going to like a particular load and all that, but once the wind is blowing at an unknown velocity, at an unknown shooting distance pretty much.
Yeah.
The less it blows around, the better chance you're gonna have of hitting where you're aiming. So there's some significant value to having a higher BC for that. Not the be all and end all. Obviously, if I took my first whitetails with a 30-30, I wasn't too worried about BC.
Well, let's have it, Ron. Why don't you step up to the plate first and give us your choice for the most practical deer cartridge?
So we've got to consider cost, availability of rifles, availability of ammunition, able to buy it whether or not you hand load. You want to get some good choices and good loads. I hate to say it.
User-friendliness across a spectrum of shooters and skill levels.
Oh, I hate to say 308 Winchester, but it's truly the right answer. I would say ballistically 7mm 08. The 308 neck down to 7. But it's so hard to find rifles and ammo for it. It's I think the ultimate all-around whitetail load and pretty close. I'd like a little more reach and range for my mule deer stuff, but I could see where it would more than do the job on mule deer as well.
The 708?
Yep, the 708. So I would say 708 for those practical reasons, but when you throw in the easy availability of the cases, the cartridges, and loads from different companies and lower prices because there's sales on volumes and all the rest of it, boy, it's hard to beat that 308.
Yeah.
Now, some people are going to say, well, now that one's got a little more recoil. Not really, because you can shoot a 150 grain bullet in your 708, you can shoot a 150 grain in your 308. You're going to have a higher BC because of the narrower bullet in the 7, but it doesn't amount to more than maybe an inch difference in the wind deflection and the drops on it. For deer hunting,
And how do you, so that cartridge, I 100% agree with you for, let's call it 80%, maybe even 90% of the deer hunting in the United States, which is typically your whitetail deer inside 300 yards.
Yes.
How do you feel reaching out with that cartridge on a big mule deer across a canyon 450 yards, maybe 500 yards?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I rarely shoot that far.
Yeah.
I try not to and all the rest of it. You know, you're the same way. But we, as Westerners, realize there are those opportunities. And if you have got the right equipment and you're dialed in and you know what you're doing and et cetera, yeah, okay. That's not even considered a long shot anymore. You know, and
not in the West, anyway.
Yeah, out in the West, because there are these. You know, the wall is here and the wall is there. You're on one side, the deer's on the other. Getting over there is just about. And I can remember shooting a whitetail in North Idaho across the canyon like that. That was 400, and I forget which exactly. You know, but one of those you better have a dial or hold over. Yeah. And I always hold over out to 400 because I know that my drops are 18 inches at 400. The deer has got a chest that's about 18 inches. So as long as I'm above that chest, I'm dropping it in there somewhere.
Yeah.
6 inches over the chest, you're dropping it right about in the heart. 12 inches over, you're dropping it in the lungs. So pretty good sized target, and you're dropping them in there. And that's what I did on this one shot, and down he went. And that's happened a few times over the years. So yeah, I would say the 708 would be good enough for that. But if you want to fudge it a little bit, 280 Ackley improved would be my step up from that 708.
But there are a lot of folks that are going to argue that's not so practical because rifles and ammo aren't as available.
There you go.
Okay, so can I have a turn?
Absolutely. It's your show. I mean, come on, let me hog it all.
Okay, so I'm not far off, but I'm going to follow in the footsteps of Jack O'Connor and say the grand old 270 Winchester. And my reasonings are, well, I mean, I've shot a dozen, maybe 2 dozen whitetail bucks and probably a dozen does in my time. But I'm not a vastly experienced whitetail hunter. Most of my experience comes with mule deer. And so many mule deer are shot between 200 and 450 yards that to me, that the way my brain's wired now, the way it's, you know, trained in there just from practical personal experience, having that reach, that 450 yard quarter-mile capability that I like to talk about is crucial. And the 270, since it starts 300-400 feet per second faster than the 308, just has that little bit of edge at distance.
Yeah.
Now, you know, it's not the be-all, end-all. There are a few weaknesses in the traditional 270 that I'll readily admit. It doesn't have a fast rifling twist rate, so you can't shoot real high BC bullets in it. The high velocity kind of makes up for that, like with a 130 grain bullet like you're talking about earlier. But the fact is, the practical nature of the cartridge comes from its wide availability. You can find a box in almost every hardware store across America.
Yeah.
And you can find rifles, new, used, every model introduced, just about, will come in a 270. Now, if you want to get cutting edge about it, you can do that too, because there's a new 270 on the block. We've talked about this a fair bit in the past. The 6.8 Western is a 270 caliber cartridge. It's a short magnum, fits in a short action, has fast twist rifling, and is optimized for heavy bullets. So the lightest factory load I know of for that is 162 grains. Mm-hmm. Then you get the 165s, 170s, 175s. So you got real good high BC bullets at pretty respectable velocity, north of 2,800, 2,900 feet per second. So that would be my answer for the young crowd that wants a practical cartridge. Pretty widely available right now, at least.
I would throw a little bit of a caveat in there because of the availability of loaded factory cartridges. There are not that many out there, are there?
You know, now this might be different where we live here in the West, but I can almost always find a box. I don't have a box here, but of the Browning Long Range Pro with a 175 grain bullet in it in any of the big box stores. So Sportsman's Warehouse here, Al's Sporting Goods, probably, I don't know, the various Cabela's for sure, Shields, Shields. You're not going to find them in your little mom and pop shops as much, or in your local gas station, which is where that 270 Winchester just beats it
everywhere.
Yes,
especially back east in White Hill country.
Yep. So that's my practical, and it's semi-practical modern sibling. Yeah,
sure.
So now the fun stuff. All practical considerations just thrown out with glee. What's your personal favorite whitetail deer cartridge in general? Whitetails, mule deer, Sitka blacktails, and coos deer, if you like.
284 Winchester. 284 Winchester. Hot new item just off the presses if it were 1964. This was kind of our first short fat magnum, first rebated rim cartridge. Had a lot of firsts going for it. Most popular, though, didn't win that category. It never really took off.
Yeah.
Actually, it never took off until they made it a 6.5 284 and started shooting long-range target stuff with it. But even now, it's coming back in the 7mm format for the long-range shooters.
Yeah.
They like the fact that it doesn't burn so much powder, doesn't burn out their barrels. It's an easy cartridge to tune up with some big, long, heavy bullets. They're not going all that fast, but they're precision shooters.
Real efficient.
Yeah. But as a hunting cartridge, it was first cranked out in an auto loader and a lever action. And so it was hampered by the usual lower chamber pressures for the maximums on it. And then they never really developed a lot of sleek bullets, and it never took off. If they had chambered that in a true short action with some long, sleek bullets and some higher max pressures like the 270 takes, that thing would have been, well, it was designed to do what the 270 did.
Yeah.
It was considered to be the short action, quick handling version of the 270, even though it was a 28. So the 280 Remington came out just before it, but they never really found that to be a lot of competition because it was supposed to compete with the 270 too, but the 270 stayed at the top of the heap. So Winchester thought, well, if Remington can try it with a cartridge that's essentially the 270 necked up, we'll just do it with something really wild and go to the short action.
What was the rifling twist rate in that 284 Winchester? Is it fast enough to stabilize?
Yeah. You can shoot 175 grain bullets in it. It'll stabilize them. At least the old styles. I don't know.
Flat base.
Pretty sure it was 1 in 10. 1 in 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I generally hunted with it with 140s and 150s. I never really needed anything more than that. And I've taken elk with it, mule deer with it.
You've hunted with that cartridge more than anybody else I know. I mean, you've shot Doll sheep with it, right? You shot elk with it. Have you shot bears with it?
Shot bighorns with it.
Bighorns, okay.
Bighorns with it, yeah.
Bears?
Yeah. I think so. I almost shot a moose with it.
Oh, really?
They hadn't flown off with all my ammo.
Oh, no.
That was that time I went and they flew my ammo away. Left it in the bush plane.
Oh, that's painful.
Yeah, but 350-yard shots at sheep.
Sure.
No problem.
So, just because we can, describe your ideal rifle in that cartridge. Tell you what. Tell us about your personal favorite rifle, and then recommend one that somebody could commission. Because you're not going to go to your local store and find one on the shelves.
Probably not. What got me started on this perfect rifle and the 284 Winchester was the 708 when it first came out, because it was in that Model 7 from Remington. Ooh. And it was short, handy. I forgot what the original barrel length on it was, but it was 20 inches, maybe 18 inches. But the whole thing was like a bolt-action version of a lever-action 30-30, only it had a much more efficient cartridge, bullet, and all the rest of it. So short, handy, quick, just what you wanted in the whitetail woods. But if you needed to take a little more precision shot, you still had more than enough ability to do that. Put a 22-inch barrel on it, and now you're starting to get a little more reach out of it, a little more velocity, and it's starting to sort of settle down as a more of a longer range one. And that's what I ended up with in the 284 was the ultralight Model 20 ultralight arms rifle.
Mel Forbes,
1988 or 89, I think I picked it up. And it was just like the answer, thank you. Because I was getting into elk hunting and sheep hunting in backcountry 2 weeks in the wilderness on a backpack kind of a stuff. And I needed that lightweight thing that would shoot. And this one would shoot. That was the thing. In those days, we always said, oh, you've got to have at least an 8-pound rifle. You can't steady them down to shoot them. Well, I picked this thing up, started shooting it, and I said, what are you talking about? I'm shooting MOA with it pretty much all the time. Not offhand, but the rifle was capable of it.
Sure.
Then the point was, well, when you're shooting it, you're going to wiggle too much and shake it all around. Come on, I'm backpack hunting. There's my target. Slap the pack down on the ground, lay over the top of it with your rifle, and you're snuggled down into essentially concrete.
Yeah.
And that's why I was shooting sheep at 350 yards and such. I shot a little coos deer, 400 and, I can't remember, it was 18 or 411, but somewhere in that range. Reached out with that one shot, bam, down he went. Same thing over his back. The 18-inch chest kind of a thing's not quite right on it, but I knew I needed daylight over his back. Right in there it was. And I always said that this rifle is like a guided missile. I was shooting 139 grain interlocks, 140 grain partitions, and then later went to some, let me think, must have been some ballistic tips from Nosler. Sure. And then I started shooting the 120 grain tip trickle shocks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
the Barnes tip trickle shocks.
Yeah, a lot faster. You're giving up your BC for wind deflection, but for a little more reach and stuff. And, of course, you got that incredible penetration they're so famous for. And that's what I was shooting in the later years of that. And they all worked out wonderfully well, including for elk. So that would be my sort of my sentimental favorite.
Yeah.
But most people aren't going to go out and buy a rifle. They're not even going to find ammo for it. If I know right, the only ammo you can buy off the shelf would be made by Winchester as the 150 grain power point, which is not a great long range bullet by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even a controlled expansion bullet, or it's just your classic shoot 'em behind the shoulder deer bullet, which works fine.
Yeah.
But if you want to do something a little more risque than that, better bullet. So you're looking at hand loading it. Now, Nosler has offered it in the past. I don't know if they're currently loading it. And then a few of the other boutique loaders will have it for you and pick your favorite bullet. They'll load it for you and all that fun stuff. But they're going to get quite pricey. You're not going to walk into the store and have a price war like you would with the 308.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Now, Mel Forbes has sold his company. Is there anybody you know of currently that's kind of favoring that cartridge that builds custom rifles for people regularly?
No, I honestly don't. Do you?
I don't, but that said, folks, any custom gunsmith worth their salt can build you one. Right. All it takes is a chamber reamer, 7mm barrel, and you can specify what twist rate you get. Yeah. If you want, you can have it built on a long action rather than a short action, so you can seat those real long, heavy, high BC bullets well out of the case. You can do that. So, if you like something a little bit unique and want a custom job done, that's easily done.
And if you want to stick with your whitetail mule deer bullets in that 140, 150 grain range, you can take a 7mm 08 and just rechamber it to 284.
Yeah.
And bingo, you're rolling. I would do that. You've got a short action. Get your favorite short action and ask your gunsmith to do that. Make that change for you. And if you're a hand loader, you're set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can really smoke that one.
Well, you've mentioned the one that I'm going to post as my all-time favorite.
Do I see a 40-degree angle on the shoulder of that thing?
Yeah. Indeed you do. 280 improved. And you've been using this longer than I have by a margin. Ron, but I've been using this cartridge probably 20 years now, close to it, and had such tremendous luck with it that I mean it's unique and different enough that I like it for that, right? I kind of like the unusual, but it also has design characteristics that are far ahead of its time. Nearly parallel sides, quite a steep shoulder, so you get really efficient powder burn, very little case stretch, so you get a whole lot of firings out of your cartridge cases without a lot of maintenance.
Indeed.
Don't have to trim very often. And with 10 to 15% less powder volume, depending on the manufacturer of the case, you get within 2 or 3% of the same speeds as a 7 rem mag.
Yeah.
So you're getting less recoil, more capacity in your magazine, because that's a 30-06 diameter cartridge case.
Sure.
And 7 rem mag levels of performance. And if you get a 1 8 twist barrel, you can actually outdo 7 rem mag factory ammo just by loading real high BC bullets. Now, I think the reason I like that over something a little more, I don't want to say pedestrian, because the 284 is anything but pedestrian, but that gives really, really good extended range performance at a very low price in recoil and so forth. Just a terrific bullet, cartridge, I should say, that handles a broad spectrum of bullets, all those fantastic 7MMs, really, really well. It was pioneered back in, what did we talk about earlier? Probably the early 60s, because that cartridge was, the 280 parent case was introduced in 57. So Ackley took that and he kept the datum point, right there, that's the measurement from the base of the cartridge to the front angle of the shoulder. He maintained that. But he blew that shoulder up much steeper, which gave it a greater internal capacity. Also widened the sides just a little bit, so it doesn't have as much body taper. Again, more capacity.
He didn't widen the sides wider than the original at the base, just the taper.
Just up here. He took most of the taper out.
Yeah.
Yes. 30-06 case head. So any standard length 30-06 action can house this cartridge. He spec'd it with a 1 9 twist rate, or I should say Nosler did that when they legitimized the cartridge in 2008. They submitted it to SAMI, which is the cartridge governing body in the United States. SAMI approved it, and the rest is kind of history. At that point, it's already, nearly a half century old.
Yeah, it's crazy how old that thing is. Makes me feel young just looking at it.
Yes. Well, you look young looking at you. Anyway, the cartridge itself has such a cult following that it continues to gain momentum. At this point, at least 5 different major manufacturers are making ammo. So Nosler has, I think, 4 different primary ones. Hornady has 1. That's the one I'm holding, 162 grain ELDX. Federal introduced 4.
Wow.
Barnes has one with a 152 grain LRX, engineered specifically for that. And there's several boutique manufacturers that make ammo as well. Weatherby is loading 280 Ackley improved ammunition with hammer bullets and swift bullets. Really, really good acceptance. Plus, and this is what makes this actually a very practical, unique choice these days, there's a lot of rifles available. You can get a Savage. You can get a Browning. You can get a Ruger. They're usually limited runs, but you can get them. They're, of course, all the like Fierce and Christensen Arms, all those guys will chamber it.
Small makers
Cooper makes some beautiful 280 Ackley improved rifles.
You know what I like about that 280 AI is it's sort of a blue collar from the ground up people's cartridge.
Yeah.
It didn't have some company saying, wow, this is the latest and greatest, put a big PR press run on it, and it's just sort of appeared. And people said, you need to try this. This is incredible. It was spread by word of mouth. Even when Nosler did it, legitimized it, you really didn't read much about it. You didn't see a lot of flashy ads going on and stuff. People just see it, recognize what it does, and gobbles it up. I like that.
I do too. I mean, it's grown out. Its popularity, its cult following has grown out of pure capability.
Yeah.
Real world use in the field. Now, excuse me, Nosler's Chubb Eastman was an engineer there for a lot of years. He's passed away now, but wonderful, wonderful guy. I got on a bus with him going out to the range day prior to the SHOT Show in Florida one day long ago. And Chubb was not necessarily, he had a thick veneer. He was a bit crusty to young sprouts, right? But I sat down beside him and risked it, and I said, Chubb, I hear you're a longtime fan of the 280 Ackley Improved. Mm-hmm. He looked at me suspiciously and didn't really answer. So I pressed my luck a little bit, and I said, I've just got one. I'm really excited to learn about it. Can I ask some questions? And he kind of relented. I saw that crack in his
opening.
Shell. We had a 45-minute conversation I'll never forget, and became good friends over the 280 Ackley Improved cartridge. Mm-hmm. And over the months, he would send me favorite data that he developed as an engineer at Nosler and whatever.
Cool.
I think he was probably a motivating factor behind legitimizing it, behind Nosler doing that. And at one point during that conversation, I said, do you have a favorite rifle? And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, tell me about it. He's, man, a few words, right? But he said, probably the easiest way to describe it is I recently loaned it to a friend for a deer hunt. I told him it had 28 clean one-shot kills in a row. And when he brought it back, it better have 29. Oh, that's a pretty good testament to that cartridge's effectiveness and shootability.
And exactly what it has. It's wonderfully effective and shootable, too. In fact, it sort of displaced the 284 for me after I got a lightweight rifle. When I got that Rifles Inc. by LeWebernick in 90, 92, somewhere in there. In that, I go, gosh, I don't know which one to pick. It's like having two girlfriends and you like them equally well. And you're like, who should I take to the dance, you know?
You have experience with this, Ron.
No, but it's dream. You can always dream, right, guys? So I started doing the same hunts with that I had done for 284. I figured, look, I've already taken a sheep and an elk and on and on. So I got to run that one for a while so I get more experience. And I can't say that it was like wow, this is so much better. But it was equally good.
Yeah.
And I remember taking my biggest doll ram at 350 yards with a one-shot kill using that one. And my biggest mule deer at around 200 inches was about a 240-yardish shot. That was a cool one because this deer was right on the fence line. I mean, one jump and he was gone. And they walked to the fence line, and the guide I was with said, we cannot go on that other side of that fence. That guy is one of those landowners where you don't even think about it. So if you shoot that deer, you make sure you anchor him. So I went for a neck shot, and I went around this hill, and he had stopped because I thought the cattle are going to screw us up because there was a herd of cattle between us and him. And he is slowly walking towards this fence, and I needed to get there quickly, and I had to go through this cattle herd. So I spooked the cattle out of sight of the deer, but they went blah, 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 blah. You figure, well, that's going to blow it.
Yeah.
Well, it actually worked in my favor because the deer stopped to what is going on with these cattle, and it was looking at the cattle. And I went around this other side of this little hill while he was looking a little bit off to the side there, didn't see me, so I was able to get just high enough above the grass to snake one in there and anchor him right there by the fence. And I just took from his carcass to the fence, if I remember right, it was 2 or 3 steps. So if he would have just gone, wow, he would have been gone.
And that was with your LeWebernick rifle.
Yep, stainless, synthetic, model 700, lightened up to 5 pounds. Shot like a house of fire. First target I ever shot with that was under half MOA.
Wow.
3 X bullets.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it was just delightful.
What rifle would you look for today if you were going to try and buy a new 280 Ackley?
You know, in recent years, that Kimber lightweight 84L, it's a long action 84 mountain ascent with a synthetic barrel and synthetic stock, pretty thin barrel. But here's the thing with these lightweight rifles for backcountry hunting like we do a lot of. Yeah, they're a lightweight barrel and they get hot. They're probably not going to shoot sub MOA anymore, but they're so accurate for the first 2 or 3 shots. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's always bang, you're dead, or bang, you're really in bad shape, and bang, now you're dead. and they're wonderful for that. I mean, if you can park 3 shots under a minute of angle with these rifles, I remember an elk at 450 yards with it. Just a lot of stuff.
Very cool.
Some of the longer shots over my career were with that 280 AI.
So that's one of the best choices on the market today, I think, that Kimber Mountain Ascent, 280 Ackley. And it does seem like, because of their thin barrels, like all thin-barreled rifles, they're a little bit picky about the ammo you feed them, but you find the right load, they just drive tacks. Another great one is Weatherby's Mark V 6-lug backcountry 2.0.
Oh, they're making that
in the Tweety Ackley. I had a conversation with Adam Weatherby high on a mountainside in Montana right before they introduced the 6.5 Weatherby RPM. And he said, we want to build a cartridge family out of this RPM. He said, the next one we're thinking is a 338, which a couple years later they introduced, and it's a fantastic cartridge. He said, what should we do to fill it in between? I said, I don't think a 30 caliber is going to do you any favors. And I said, the trouble, so the 6-lug action cannot house magnum diameter cartridges. It's too petite in diameter.
So they got to stick with the 30-06 size rim, .473.
The rim, yes. I said, I think your best bet is to just adopt a 280 Ackley, and you'll make a lot of friends just by doing that.
Yeah.
I was recently told that the 6.5 RPM is the only thing that trumps the 280 Ackley in popularity in that rifle.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of Weatherby backcountry 2.0 rifles going out in 280 Ackley. Fantastic rifle. They're a little pricey, but they're worth it. If you want to get something for less money, look into the Savages. A nice mid-range rifle is anything by Christensen or Fierce or whatever in that $2,000 range.
Well, now what about the Browning X bolts? Don't they have
In
Hell's Canyon
fact, they do several of them. The Speed and the Speed Long Range and so forth, and those all come with a 1-in-8 rifling twist rate, a little faster than standard spec.
Yeah.
Now I've tested some of those, and they shoot real well. There is an interesting caveat to that. When the engineers there developed the chamber, they intentionally gave it enough freebore that hand loaders could seat real long bullets out of that powder capacity, which optimizes it for hand loaders. The one that I wrung out, worked real hard, was crazy accurate with hand loads, but factory loads it didn't like as much. I had to work to find one that shot better than a minute of angle. I did, but it wasn't everything, right? Just because I think it had a little bit more freebore than the factory loads liked, but holy moly, when you started hand loading, it was amazing.
Let me ask you something. I also really like the 7 Rem mag, and because it throws the same bullets maybe 100 feet per second on average faster than the 280, not a big deal, but if you're picking the best, go for it. But of course, you've got a slightly bigger, fatter cartridge. You need a different bolt face and all the rest of it.
A little more recoil, a little less magazine capacity. Yep.
But when I'm looking at this 280 AI and its long neck, and I think of the shorter neck relatively on the 7 Rem mag, and you're thinking about bullet alignment for precision shooting, have you noticed that on average you're getting better accuracy out of a 280 AI than an equally accurate barrel rifle in a 7 Rem mag or any of the other 7s with the shorter necks? In other words, is it worth considering a huge advantage is that longer neck for more consistently holding the bullet and getting good alignment?
That's a good question, Ron, and one that I confess I don't have an answer to, because I have not successfully measured any difference.
That
said, most of the 7 Rem mags I've shot have been real nice rifles, and most of the 280 Ackleys I've shot have been real nice rifles, and when I hand load for them, they all shoot well.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if you were to do a test of a bunch of entry-level rifles that you might find that the 280 Ackley has an accuracy edge because of that. We're talking factory ammo as well.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about this idea I have at least come up with in recent years? When you look at the 7 Rem mag with the 300 Win mag, any of the older mid-20th century wildly popular cartridges. I mean, they've obviously been able to do what they've done all these years. They're revered and extremely popular for a darn good reason.
Yes.
And now they're being a little bit eclipsed by the longer high BC bullet things and the more efficient cartridges and all the rest of it. But I think they've got a reputation for so-so accuracy, like hunting accuracy. When we were kids, if you had a rifle that shot 1.5 MOA, that was a really accurate rifle.
Yeah.
And I've hunted with rifles like that and taken 400 shots and reliably made them because you're grouping about a 6-inch target with an 1.5 MOA rifle at that distance. So what's the issue? But do you think that because those rifles were built back in the era where you chamber them for your general purpose hunting rounds good enough we weren't thinking in those days that let's make everything so precise with all our tolerances that we've got and really shoot precision. And it strikes me that the PRC types and the 6.8 Western and all the new stuff, and to a degree that 280 AI, you've got your tolerances a little bit tighter. And the manufacturers are saying, let's just make this chamber perfect, not just okay.
Yeah.
And I think if so you got Grandpa's 7-rem mag, and it shoots so-so. And you get a new 7-rem mag, and it shoots maybe a little bit better. But if you get the PRC version of that 7, it's going to shoot a little better because that whole thing was set up for precision shooting.
Yeah. I think we've approached and gone through a bit of a trade-off because back in the day, I think a lot of ammo was still carried in saddlebags and on the dusty dashboard of a Jeep and dug out of the back pocket of your jeans as you chased after the buck you're shooting at, right?
Yeah.
And there was an awareness coming out of World War I and World War II of combat reliability that we have 100% lost in rifle design these days.
Yeah.
And so those guys understood the importance of being able to jam a corroded, dusty, maybe dinged 300 Win Mag cartridge into their magazine, slam the bolt home, and get that shot into that deer or elk, right? These days, I think we tend to obsess a little bit more over perfection, right? As riflemen, we have evolved to where precision is paramount, and so we're a little OCD about everything. We take care of our ammo. We don't leave it in the dashboard of our vehicle because we don't want it to overheat.
Yeah.
We try and keep it as clean as possible. We clean our rifles a lot more often, and so we still maintain that reliability. But I do think if you were to leave a box of 7PRC or whatever, pick your modern cartridge, in a saddlebag for 2 years through several rainstorms, a lot of dust, riding around in the horse trailer with dust flying around there, and you were to take just a basic rifle by Mossberg or Browning or Ruger, any of those, and shoot it for 30 years without cleaning it, and then pair those two up, I think you'd have some malfunctions when your ammo refused to go into your chamber.
Yeah.
The old 300 Win Mag and the old 7-rem mag, they're probably still going to go bang.
Yeah, they're going to shoot.
So there's a balancing act there, folks. If you are a modern cartridge shooter, well, treat it carefully. Just maintain it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing admirable about neglecting your rifle and your ammunition. It just used to happen a lot.
Yeah, it used to happen a lot because we never looked, in the 60s, we never looked at these rifles and cartridges as precision unless we were specifically loading up for varminting.
Yeah.
Or some kind of a target game. Bench rest shooters were like, some people do that, but we just go hunting or plinking or something. So it was like good enough.
Yeah.
Because exactly what you said, the real deal was grab that cartridge, slam it in there, and shoot your deer.
Yep.
And then let's get back to work. We got a job to go home to.
And if you thought you might shoot 500 yards, you'd probably buy a Weatherby and some real expensive ammo. We didn't have rangefinders. We didn't have dial-up scopes.
No, you wanted something fast. 300 Weatherby Magnum or something like that. That's what sold those things. It wasn't the extra power so much as the extra reach.
Yeah. I think Covey's asking for her dinner.
Oh, Covey's always... Every time we do a video, Covey starts barking.
I want to be part of the show, Dad. What do you think she would advance as her favorite cartridge?
Whatever could hit a pheasant.
Yes. Anything between 28 and 16 gauge, right?
Yeah, she likes a wide pattern, shall we say, not a tight group.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she wants her Ron to be reliable, a reliable killer every time a bird comes up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, every once in a while, one comes up and stays up. And then she doesn't like me.
I know that feeling. Yeah. Well, anything else you have to add on this discussion?
Not really, other than the personal elements. So many of us get all worked up about the precision of this and the precision of that, the ballistics and everything else. While I think your general run-of-the-mill deer hunter is more concerned about Dad gave me this rifle, or Grandpa shot this rifle, or our family has always shot Brand X rifles with this cartridge, and that's what I'm going to use, and by golly, it's the best.
Yeah. Because
I've had guys say the 30-30 is the best deer cartridge in the world. And you ask them if they can prove it, well, I've shot all my deer with it. So, pretty much means that's true for him.
According to
that's
him.
the best one.
Yeah, that's gospel.
Yeah, he's not looking to drop one at 400 yards by holding 18 inches and all that. Yeah, it's just like, I know what I need because of the way I deer hunt, and this Cartridge does it for me. So I would say to anyone out there listening, if you have a favorite cartridge, whether it really is a ballistic champion or not, it's working for you for the way you hunt and where you hunt, you've probably got the ideal rifle. But if you're having some issues, I think it does pay to start asking yourself, why would I want this new sleek cartridge with a high BC bullet with another 100 feet per second, or whatever little things we're talking about? If you want to start considering that stuff, you might discover that there's a significant advantage. Especially if you're coming out into the open country and hunting where your shots are going to be a little farther. Maybe you do want to consider that 6.8 Western or the 280 AI or any of even the old 270. My gosh, I've shot so much game with that 270 over the years. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's funny how long that thing has been around and how much longer it's going to hang around because it's just so good.
It just works. For deer, it's so good. But there, if you approach it with an open mind, folks, there is more than just marketing hype behind these new bullets and cartridges. And yeah, the 6.8 Western does everything that 270 Winchester does and a whole bunch more. So if you feel like you need more, I mean, that's just an example, but explore with an open mind. You may find that you have a new favorite.
And note that he said need more, not Creedmore.
Oh, yeah. Or bleed more.
Use a Creedmore and they will bleed more. The funny thing about Creedmore is most people don't know that name goes back to the 1880s.
Yeah.
It references a shooting range. They were doing 1,000-yard shooting with black powder rifles.
On the outskirts of New York City, no
on the Creedmore farm. It was a guy's name, and it was the wonderful target range. So they were designing cartridges called the Creedmores way back in those days. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was the 40 millimeter Creedmore or the 40 caliber Creedmore. What there were 2 or 3 different cartridges that were named Creedmore already in the 1890s.
I think that's where the U.S. won its first world championship too.
Beat the Irish, if I remember.
Irish beat everybody else over in the old world, right?
Yeah.
And they started claiming they were the new world champions. And America's like, hold on. You didn't outshoot us yet.
Yeah.
And they did an invitational. They met on the Creedmore range. And it came down to the single last shot fired by Colonel Bodine.
Oh, I didn't
know that. And he had one of these long black powder rifles, right? Breech loading cartridge rifle. The crazy thing about the story is it was hot. I think he was probably making an excuse to let his rifle cool a little bit. I don't know, but he asked for a drink. They brought him a soda, and when he opened it, the bottle shattered and cut his shooting hand to where blood was squirting.
Oh, my gosh.
He handed the broken bottle off, wrapped it tightly with his handkerchief. Now, remember, he's a colonel in the Army in a time when we'd probably been doing a lot of fighting. Laid down prone. This was unsupported competition. Prone at 1,000 yards and shot a bullseye and won the match.
Wow.
What a man.
That part I didn't know. I knew he'd won, and I knew about the Creedmore, but I didn't know about this guy and his cut hand.
Yeah.
After that, he was known as Colonel Cut Hand, right?
It could have been. But it was cool. I mean, the Irish were a point ahead.
Wow.
And it was 3 points for a bullseye. So he had to shoot a bullseye or the next ring, whatever that was, for a 2-point. Or we'd tie. If he missed, the Irish won. But he shot his bullseye and won us the championship.
All right. Good job, sir.
And with that, our discussion of deer cartridges has spanned the world. Look at that.
Look at that.
Yeah.
We can get deer in Ireland.
Folks, thanks for tuning in. As always, check out Ron Spomer Outdoors. He's got my favorite YouTube channel. And occasionally, he even lets me appear on it.
Yeah, that's why it's so good.
My boys watch every single episode that comes out on RSO.
Corrupting America's youth.
Somebody's got to do it.
One show at a time.
Yes. But follow Ron along there. And if you would, of course, jump on, rate, and review the Backcountry Hunting Podcast. And I have a funny but kind of special request. In the rating department, our show is stuck at 992 ratings. All favorable, pretty much. But I'd like 8 more. Because then I'd have 1,000.
That's a nice round number, folks.
Yeah.
Give that guy a rating.
So,
does the rating have to be good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I'm asking for good ones,
You're asking for good.
as long as it's a rating, it'll count.
It'll count. Okay, so any rating will work, folks, but we would prefer a good.
Yeah.
Or at least the upper echelon. So,
And of course, as always, reviews help make us visible, help us grow as a show, and we appreciate that. And check out all of our bonus content on patreon.com/backcountry. We sure appreciate those of you that are already on board there and supporting the podcast. Just can't tell you how much difference that makes. So thank you. And I think that's a wrap on our most practical and our favorite deer cartridges. Ron, thanks for coming on again.
oh, you're more than welcome. But I think we need to actually go deer hunting with these cartridges to prove to one another how good they really are.
I think that's a good idea because I'm not sure I believe you on the 284.
I don't believe you a bit on that 280 actually improved.
Well, you don't have to because you have personal experience.
Oh,
Folks, I'm Joseph Von Benedict here with Ron Spomer, and we will see you in the backcountry.